Hey guys, welcome back to another weekly update. Mostly did work on E1M3 this week, but got some work done in some other areas as well, so let's jump right into this. First off, fixed jib timing. Now this was an issue that I ran into with jibbing where you would jib somebody, the jibs would fly out, and then their jibbing sprite would start playing too often. So like them falling down, they would fall down, but then they would stand back up and fall down again. And so I found that was an issue with it was just having too much time go between when they would start the jib animation and then it would end, but it would still be playing before it switched to the jibbed body sprite. So it would just start replaying. This has been something that I've been messing around with a lot, and I'm sure I'll have to mess around with it more in the future, but for now, it seems like I've at least gotten much closer to fixing it, if not fixed it outright. One of the things that I did was I have to set states with the way that their sprites work. I have to set a state of, when they start to jib, then set a state when they have jibbed, and it will set the sprites based on what state is active. And basically what I did was I moved the state change around in the timeline of where the code runs. So I moved them kind of closer together so that it should actually play it correctly. Hopefully, we'll see. And then in the same vein of jibs, adjusted the jib chunk spawns. One of the things that I was noticing was that when you jib somebody, it spawns those little chunks. I talked about it last week because we added a lot more variety with it. One of the issues that we were running into was they would kind of all spawn in the same arc. Like they would all kind of hit the ground at the same time. I wanted it to be a lot more random, and they would all kind of be like almost evenly spaced. It looked too uniform, so I needed to make it a little bit more chaotic. So what I did was I wound up adding in more variety. Well, actually, I added less variety, but in a way that made it have more variety, strangely enough. Uh, so the way that it worked before was I would have an XYZ value, and then for each one of those values, I would generate a random number between negative 25,000 and 25,000. And so you would have 50,000 different spots that you could end up for X, Y, and Z, and they would each be their own number. And so that would originate from the enemy, and then it would have Unreal calculate an arc from the enemy to that location. So you would think that with that much variety, you would have jibs going all over the place, but unfortunately, what happened was they would always be in a weirdly similar arc. And it's supposed to be random, sometimes it would work, but for some reason, most of the time, they would actually be way too similar. So what I did instead was I instead get a random number between negative and positive 25, and then I multiply that by 1,000. So it's the same distance possibility, but it's less possibilities. And once I did that, it actually got way more variety. So now the jibs actually are way more chaotic, and it works much, much better now. So I'm liking that a lot more. Jibs, I'm going to be spending a lot of time on jibs still, so the jibs are still nowhere near where I want them to be, but it's a much, much bigger step forward than where we were before. So I'm much happier with it now. Next up, we got new material for still water. Before, the only water material that I had was water that was running like in a river, and well, obviously you don't necessarily always want to have rivers, so now we've got some still water. And it's not as simple as just making a standard, just basically a picture of water. It's not quite as simple as that, because even when water is still, there's still a little bit of movement in it, especially, once you get close to it, and once you jump into it. It doesn't dynamically ripple around where you are or anything, but it does have some little bits of movement in it that just make it stand out specifically as water, because otherwise it would look too strange. It would look too solid. So you have to have a little bit of movement in there to make it look fluid still. So that was a little bit of trial and error, but we got it working. So I think it looks much better now. Or E1M3 progress. I still don't have the whole map laid out, mostly because as I'm going on, I'm trying to establish the overall look of the map and trying to make each room that I add in make a little bit more sense. So old ones like Doom, they didn't really have to make too much sense in terms of layout, because there was this level of disconnect. That the areas in Doom don't look real. They just, they look like a video game, and that's obviously just fine. But when you start getting into games like build engine games like Duke Nukem, Shadow Warrior, and Blood, where much more realistic environments are possible, you have to start being able to make sense of the environment some. Now, obviously, there's a lot of levels there that don't make much sense and are a little strange and obviously kind of video gamed up a little bit. So I don't have to go full realism with these maps, especially because that would just be really boring. You lose a lot of kind of flavor with it, I guess I would say. So not going full realism with it, but also you have to make things make a little bit more sense. So I'm slowing down a little bit with the rooms. When I make a room, I go in and I try to make a little bit more sense and make it seem a little bit more unique, so that I'm not just throwing in a whole bunch of empty rooms together. Now, some old games did that, but once again, kind of need a little bit more realism with these more build engine looking games. So it's a little bit slow, but I'm getting the layout figured out much more, and as we see from the next point here, more sprites. Making a lot more sprites for this level, but obviously, every sprite that I make can be reused in other levels. And so it's just a lot of making things for E1M3 right now. But it's turning out. I'm actually liking it. And I noticed last night as I was working on it, I kind of turned around in the editor, and when you start working on a map, it's just kind of in this blank void, and you're just building up shapes in it. And I turned around in it to move somewhere, and kind of realized that it's starting to look like a map now. So that's nice. But as for now, that is about it. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. I will see you next week. Get more work on E1M3 done. Hopefully I can show you some more complete screenshots of it then. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody. I'll see you next week.